14. Installing feeder cables. Before installing feeder cables, determine the routing. Determine the route of the cable based on the route drawing of the feeder cable in the engineering design drawings. When determining the route of the feeder line, note that the main feeder should be as short as possible. Measure the cabling distance from the antenna jumper to the jumper at the top of the rack on site, based on the antenna installation position and feeder route. 14.1. Cutting feeder cable. Feeder lines are generally transported to the site in rolls. Wind the feeder line on the round plane of the roll on-off tube based on the measuring main feeder length of each sector. Measure off the feeder line by checking the length scale of the feeder line. Add 1 to 2 meters of surplus to the measured length and cut the cable. Each time you finish cutting a main feeder line, you must paste the corresponding identification labels on both ends of the main feeder line, such as ANT1, ANT2, ANT3, ANT4, ANT5 and ANT6. After feeder line installation is completed, attach permanent labels. Move the cut feeder lines to the roof of the building. Ensure that the feeder lines are not squeezed or abused during transportation so that the feeder lines are not damaged. 14.2. Making feeder connectors. A feeder line connector consists of the plug body, O-ring, spring ring and connector body. Grease and a saw locating guide ring are also materials required during installation. The saw locating guide ring is intended to assist hacksaw use when cutting feeder lines, if feeder knives are not used on site. Processing method with a feeder line knife. Use a knife to peel off the feeder line 40 mm away from the port. Check the auxiliary blade of the feeder line knife, which is located at the STD/RC of the feeder line. Align the primary blade with the peak of a ripple on the feeder line external conductor. Rotate the knife based on the rotation direction indicated on the knife until the protecting skin handles are completely folded, so that all inside-outside copper conductors of the feeder line are cut away. At the same time, the small auxiliary blade trims off the external plastic protection tube from the feeder line. Peel off the protecting skin again. Now, the external copper conductor with its protective cover peeled off should have 5.5 waves. Install the O-ring. Apply a small amount of grease. Install the plug. Install the spring ring. Press down the foam edge, clear burrs and filings. Expand the external conductor with a tube expander that comes with a feeder line knife, or put the connector on the plug to hold the connector, and expand the conductor by pulling on the plug. Check the expansion surface, clear burrs and filings, and install the connector again. While using a spanner to hold the connector, screw the plug into the connector and tightly screw the connector down to complete the assembly. Processing method without feeder line knife. Peel off 50 mm of feeder line protecting insulation. Check that the external connector with its insulation peeled away has at least 6.5 waves. Install on the O-ring, apply grease, install the plug, put on the spring ring, put on the saw locating guide ring, and use the hacksaw to saw off the cable along the saw guide ring. The remaining procedures are the same as those when using the feeder line knife. 14.3. Fixing the feeder hanger. Before laying the feeder line, install the triple feeder hanger for the main feeder line every 1.5 meters along the iron towers or cabling racks. Do not exceed 1.65 meters. Try to install the triple feeder hangers at even intervals and at a consistent direction. To install 2 rows of feeder hangers in the same cabling ladder, keep these 2 routes parallel and orderly. 14.4. Laying feeder lines. Again, check the main feeder line labels pasted on both ends of the main feeder line and confirm that they are correct. Use packaging bags to wrap the main feeder line connectors already assembled and bind them with cable ties. Make preliminary arrangement of the main feeder line to be led from the antenna and prior to entering the room. Starting from the antenna end of the main feeder line, arrange the line while inserting it into the triple feeder hanger. After the feeder line is arranged in an orderly manner, fasten the feeder hanger in place. Keep the main feeder line straight. There should not be any distortion between the two feeder hangers. Fixing both ends of the feeder line at the same time is not allowed. When leading the main feeder into the room from the building top along the wall, the network operator should provide an outdoor wall creeping cabling ladder. The main feeder line on the cabling ladder should be fixed with a triple feeder hanger. In case of bends when cabling the feeder line, the constant minimum bend should be greater than 30 centimeters. 14.5. Leading the feeder line into the room. When leading the feeder line into the equipment room, ensure that the feeder line does not allow rain into the equipment room by the use of a water dripping band. Lead the feeder line into the equipment room via the feeder line window. There must be cabling racks for leading in the indoor and outdoor feeder lines. Unscrew the fastening hoop on the feeder line window far enough to allow you to work. Remove the small hole-sealed lid which the feeder line goes through. Lead the feeder line into the equipment room through the feeder hole on the feeder line window. When leading the feeder line into the indoor cabling rack from an outdoor cabling rack, 2 persons are required to cooperate indoors and outdoors so that equipment in the equipment room is not damaged when the main feeder line is led into the equipment room, and that the feeder line is not damaged due to inappropriate force used during installation. There should be 30 cm straight lead for the feeder line at the lightning arrestor. After pulling the feeder line in position, tighten the fastening hoop and confirm the routing is tidy. Cut off the surplus feeder line let into the equipment room based on the rack installation position, length of the jumper at the top of the rack, lightning arrestor configuration, or installation position of the lightning arrestor stand, minimum bending radius of the feeder line, and the look of the cabling in the equipment room. When cutting off a feeder line, ensure that the temporary label on the feeder line is intact. The label should remain in place on each feeder line and not cut off to avoid confused feeder line connections. 14.6. Making indoor feeder connectors. Complete assembly of all feeder line connectors is to be installed in the room by following the mentioned procedure of building connector assemblies. 14.7. Connecting the main feeder line to the lightning arrestor. Install a lightning arrestor without any ground cable directly onto the feeder line. Ensure proper insulation between the lightning arrestor and the cabling rack. To install a lightning arrestor with a lightning arrestor stand, carefully adjust each feeder line and ensure that the screws penetrate properly when the main feeder line is connected to the lightning arrestor. 14.8. Feeder grounding. Install feeder grounding kits in at least 3 positions on each main feeder line. For an antenna feeder system installed on a building top, the 3 positions are: the position where the feeder line is led out from the antenna pole, the position where the feeder line is led out from the building top floor, the position where the feeder line is led into the equipment room. For an antenna installed on an iron tower, the 3 positions are: the iron tower platform, the position where the main feeder line is led out from the iron tower to the outdoor cabling rack, and the position where the main feeder is led into the equipment room. If the main feeder line is more than 60 meters long, additional feeder line grounding kits on the main feeder line should be installed, generally with 1 grounding kit installed every 20 meters. 14.9. Installing the feeder grounding kit. Based on the mentioned principles of feeder line grounding, select an appropriate position for installing grounding kits. Cut open the sheath of the feeder line according to the size of the grounding cable copper sheet. Clamp the copper sheet and the spring clasp of the grounding cable with an external conductor of the feeder line. At the same time, lead the grounding cable of the grounding kit to the direction of the ground mat connection point. The included angle between the grounding cable and the feeder line should preferably be no greater than 15 degrees. Note that reverse or inverse connection of the grounding cable is not allowed. Take waterproof measures to seal the locations where the grounding kits and the feeder line are connected. First, wrap 2 layers of PVC insulating tape and then wrap 2 layers of waterproof tape. Then, wrap 2 layers of insulating tape around the waterproof tape. When you rep the tape, make sure the upper layer of the tape overlaps approximately half of the lower layer. Connect the grounding end of the grounding kit to the body of the tower or the outdoor cabling rack previously connected to the lightning protection net on the roof of the building. Remove the paint and any oxidation at a radius of approximately 13 mm around the joint to ensure proper electrical contact. Before the main feeder line is let into the equipment room, you can connect the grounding end of its grounding kit to the outdoor grounding copper bus bar. The outdoor grounding bus bar is intended for lightning protection grounding. It is generally installed on the exterior wall of the feeder line window and is best installed directly under and near the feeder line window. 14.10. Installing the lightning arrestor rack. For a wideband lightning arrestor not requiring independent grounding, you can directly connect it in serial mode between the main feeder and the indoor set-top jumper. In this installation, the lightning arrestor should be insulated from the indoor device conductors such as cabling racks. For the lightning arrestor that requires grounding, a matched lightning arrestor rack is usually required. For the assembly of a lightning arrestor rack, refer to the assembly manual provided by the supplier. A common installation procedure is as follows. Install the lightning arrestors to the lightning arrestor rack. During installation, pay attention to the difference between the two ends of the lightning arrestor. One end is a DIN-M connector and the other is a DIN-F connector. Make sure that the DIN-M connectors of all the lightning arrestors installed on the rack are in the same direction. Confirm the same configuration for the DIN-F connectors. Attach the assembled lightning arrestor rack to the indoor cabling rack. The installation position of the lightning arrestor rack should facilitate the connection to the main feeder and set-top jumper as well as cabling. Align the DIN-M connector of the lightning arrestor with the input direction of the main feeder and the DIN-F connector with the direction from jumper to rack. The base of the lightning arrestor rack can be adjusted according to the width of the cabling rack during installation. Connect the grounding cable of the lightning arrestor rack to the outdoor grounding copper bus bar, being careful to avoid any contact with the indoor cabling rack conductor. The lightning arrestor rack should be insulated from the cabling rack. 14.11. Installing the indoor jumper. Usually, the indoor set-top jumper is a half-inch feeder installed between the lightning arrestor, connected with the main feeder and the rack. Generally, the set-top jumper is 2 meters long or made up as required on site. The made-up jumper is directly installed on the lightning arrestor or rack top. If the jumper needs to be made on site, cut the half-inch feeder to the required length, install the proper feeder connector according to the feeder connector manual, and then connect the jumper to the lightning arrestor and rack top. 14.12. Connecting the antenna jumper. Interconnect all the sector feeders with the corresponding antenna jumper connectors, making sure they are reliable, and wrap insulation tape on the connector, making 2 coils, the waterproof tape by 2 coils, and then insulation tape by 2 coils once again. While wrapping, the upper level tape overlaps approximately half of the lower level tape surface. 14.13. Checking and testing the antenna feeder system. Check whether all the RF antennas and GPS antennas are installed with a lightning arrestor protection angle range of 45 degrees. Check the antenna serviceability using an SWR tester. Connect the jumper connector at the cabinet to the RF out interface of the SWR tester. Select the SWR test mode and test the SWR of the entire antenna feeder system. The test value should be less than 1.3. If not, you should immediately check the feeder connector installation, antenna, feeder and lightning arrestor. Input the corresponding VSWR value and draft a VSWR test diagram according to the actual conditions. After testing shows passing conditions, replace all temporary labels with permanent formal labels. Note: during the BTS installation process, you are required to record the model and serial number of each component and fill in the BTS information table as part of the engineering installation and acceptance report. At this time, except for the background server, all the hardware of the ZXC10 BSSB system has been installed. You now need to perform normative checks to the installed hardware and then perform power on and power off tests on the system to ensure that the system is ready for commissioning during the next phase.